Yes, and we are live. I'm here with my new friend Margaret. Margaret, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing real good. Thank you, David.
You're recovering from a sports event that didn't go your way?
Yes, for the Buffalo Bills.
Uh, well, did you have a lot of money on it or no?
No, no money on it. No.
Okay. Just your dignity, your honor, your pride.
Thankfully, it's early in the season.
Okay, I have no idea. I don't know anything about sports, especially hockey. I don't like hockey at all. But it's nice to meet you. I'm gonna chat to you about all kinds of things, I'm sure. But first, before we dive into your special interests, let's just give a general overview of how you were raised. Were you raised Catholic? If so, what was that like? The family, church, God and religion, prayer life, these sorts of things. Just give us some highlights to paint a picture of your faith journey all the way up until today. Okay?
Okay, certainly, David. I grew up back in the 1950s in an Irish Catholic family, and our faith was very important to us. But from the time I was a young girl, I had some particular experiences which really, for me anyway, accentuated that wow, there's a difference between being a girl in the church and being a boy. And my one brother, Paul, for his birthday gift, he received a replica of a church altar. And right away, he started playing the part of the priest, and he told my twin sister and myself to grab some chairs. So we were sitting there like parishioners, and the mass was going all right until a certain point. I was maybe only about 4 or 5. I remember standing up and I said, Paul, I want to be the priest. And he said, no, you're girls. You have to be a man. So that really imparted for me anyway that, hadn't even really realized that. And probably about a month or two after that, my mom was an organist. And this was a choir practice on Tuesday. And after it finished, she asked, because there was no one in the church, if we would like to go and stand behind the altar. Well, of course, we were just so excited because you never saw girls, women up on the church and, really around the altar. So my twin sister did that. And I remember I just got situated behind the altar and I looked out, and I don't know why this thought came to me. Gee, this must be neat on the weekends. This place must be, it was packed with people. So all of a sudden from behind me, I hear this gruff voice. What are those girls doing up on that altar? Well, it turned out it was the Monsignor, and that's no place for them to be. So, right again, that really imparted this difference. And my mother normally didn't rock the boat, but she said to him, rather, that's right, unless women are cleaning the altar. And he immediately turned around and he left the church. But those were my earliest experiences. And then moving forward, I would call them rumors. I was hearing like older women speaking that they heard that there were women priests within our church's history. So, of course, from the time I got into my 20s, I was asking all different priests about were there women priests in our church's history. And of course, the answer was an emphatic no. So you get to a certain point in your life, and it wasn't my bucket list, but I mean, it was something that I definitely, in a sense, wanted to find this answer. And the curiosity just grew in me. And I got my master's in pastoral ministry, and my naivete really showed when I thought, gee, they have a good research library here. Maybe I could find something. But it wasn't until some years later, I just kept reading book after books. And I came across the Catholic priest. He was a Catholic priest formerly over in England, John Vingegaard's. And he had this book, The Ordination of Woman in the Catholic Church. And he actually has a chapter in there. And for everyone listening, this information isn't coming from the Bible. It's coming from biblical research. And I just find it so interesting because in a sense, it opens a whole new chapter into my life anyway, and as well to other Catholics about, in a sense, this hidden history within our church's early centuries. So there was this chapter on Mary, and it so impressed me that that's why I wrote my book. And he came right out and said that Mother Mary was a woman priest. Now I can imagine if I could only see out into the audience, and I was just ecstatic. I threw the book up in the air, but then I had to gather it up and open the page. Now, did I really just see what I saw? And then this awful feeling came over me because it was a realization that I had been lied to by my own church. And I'll tell you, David, that wasn't a very comfortable feeling. And for a few months there, it was really rough. And then I decided, well, why should I be the only one? I know there's women that realize this, that, that are the experts that have done this biblical research. But for the average everyday Catholic woman out there, and whether you're in Buffalo, if you're over in Canada, Ireland, Australia, the Philippines, anywhere worldwide, they have never heard, I say it's wonderful information because it's giving us this whole new look into the church history. And for a woman, of course, that ever had any calling from Jesus, again, it's just wonderful. So I firmly believe in Jesus Christ, but what I really don't like is that our current hierarchy has this centuries-old narrative that has completely, well, first of all, it just isn't true. And it's keeping women from being able to answer their own call if they receive that from Jesus. And at minimal, I don't care if you're just a regular lay woman like I am, or if you're a religious sister, any woman in the Catholic Church deserves, at minimum, at least the truth from the hierarchy.
Yeah, so who are some of the historical names, like the heroes of the women's priest history, like some of the priestesses that were
Well,
Catholic?
there was Lita, there was Flavia Vitali. I hope I'm saying
Are
that
these
right.
are these canonized saints or
Kao, no, these are women priests from the early 4th to the 6th century.
oh, okay, were any of them saints, any of them canonized?
Not those ones.
But any
Later on, you had doctors of the church. You had like Saint Catherine of Siena.
she was a priest?
No, she wanted to be a priest, but
Oh,
no, she
okay.
wasn't.
No, I'm just wondering if any of the female priests were canonized.
Not that I know of.
Oh, okay. So, but did any of the female priests become bishops or cardinals or popes?
There were bishops. I'm trying to remember her name. There was definitely
Which century would
from
that have been?
from Ireland. This is back in the early church centuries, like in the Middle Ages,
Early Middle Ages?
early to Middle
Oh,
Ages.
okay. Okay. And
Yeah, and in the
so,
first 1200 years of Christianity, women were ordained. And that came from Gary Macy's book, The Hidden History of
okay.
Woman's Ordination.
So the popes around that time, they were smiling on women's ordination?
No, I wouldn't say that. There was, back in 496, there was a Bishop Galatius, and he was so upset that women were reputed to be doing the rows of males. In other words, they were actually up there during the consecration of the Holy Eucharist, and they were distributing communion.
So the hierarchy never embraced it. The hierarchy has never embraced women's ordination. Is that what you're saying, or was there a
Not
time?
not as a joint, like a whole, like a large group. But there were exceptions because during this time, even though the bishops were against it, there were priests that were allowing women to do this.
Yeah, but the living magisterium of the church has always been in the Pope and in the bishops together with the Pope. So has there ever been a time where all the bishops together under the Pope, they smiled on women's ordination, or not yet?
Oh, no, 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 no
That's
way,
in the
because
future.
back,
That's in the future
uh,
for you, for your vision. That's something that will happen in the future.
I definitely want it to be, but I believe it will never happen
Ah,
until the truth, this early history that our current hierarchy does not acknowledge, comes out, this biblical factual evidence comes out, so that the every Catholic woman in particular knows this. Because if I'm out picketing, all the narrative they know of it is, and what I knew until I, realized this biblical research was there, was that there absolutely were no women. So then they see someone like myself or other women, and like that we are literally like crazy.
yeah. It goes against everything that the living magisterium has ever taught, and so you can understand the concern and the reticence. But who are the heroes today? I mean, are you a small player? Are you a large voice today for women's ordination, or are you just one of many, or how many
I'm
are
one of
involved?
many. You have Sister Joan Chittister. You have a woman from the women's ordination, Kate uh, McAuley. You have the former Irish president. Um, she has spoken out profoundly for this.
What about
But
Sinead O'Connor? Was she a priestess?
she was ordained as a priest, and then in the end, she left that and she did was in the Islam
Oh, really?
faith. Yes.
Really? Oh, I didn't know that.
But what happened was she herself had such an awful childhood. She
Hmm.
was abused by her mother and actually ended up in one of those Magdalene laundries.
Oh my God.
And that's why her whole life she was trying to bring out this issue of abuse to children. And the most famous example was when she was on Saturday Night Live. And I realized what she was trying to do, but instead, her whole issue of helping children that are being abused was just completely annihilated because everyone was seeing what she was doing,
Hmm.
tearing up the Pope's
Image.
picture, and that cost her dearly. She said she really lost her career, musical career, that is,
Oh,
over in the United States.
wow.
And it was a time that she was really starting to get up there, and everyone was saying, oh, she's going to have a great, success in the United States as well.
Wow. Yeah, very troubled and disturbed woman. So I didn't know that she left Christianity. That's horrible. Would you ever consider leaving Christianity?
No,
No? What about leaving Catholicism, going to the Anglican Church where they have women's ordination?
I don't think so.
Why?
I'm just, I guess we're all habits of, we're creatures of habits. And I see my goal right now is staying in the Catholic Church to change it in the sense of not bringing back something, a brand new tradition. It would seem like a brand new tradition because obviously we haven't seen it for centuries on our church altars, but it's bringing back what was there. And Pope Francis is saying we need a new theology of woman. Well, again, what about, in a sense, I believe that's sidestepping the actual past history.
Yeah,
And
well, I know they're considering bringing back the deaconesses. I know they're considering that for sure.
that would be a start
Yeah.
if that in fact happens.
I think
Um,
it could happen. I think it could happen because it's well established that deaconesses were a thing, right?
well, it depends who you talk to.
Uh-huh.
Um, Pope Francis was even saying that when he was taught in the seminary, he believed that the women that were there, like in the role of deaconess, were just there basically to help other women get into the water for baptism. But of course, we know there's three of the oldest Greek studies, again from biblical research. They all say a man or a woman, they're on the altar, they're in the presence of a bishop. And of course, the bishop would, pray over them and he would put his hand on their shoulder. They would receive a stole around their neck. They would both receive the cup to drink from. And the women were called deaconesses.
Yeah. I thought that was well established that there were deaconesses. I don't know what
And
role
there's
they
even
had, but
bishops today that are so entranced against the idea of, forget even like women being a priest, but woman being a deacon. They are just completely against this.
yeah, I have to be honest. I would leave Christianity altogether if the church said that women could be priests. I would just leave Christianity because I think it's well established that the church says that they can never be priests. Like Pope Francis has said it, John Paul II has said it, and it's been so firmly taught by the living magisterium that it just cannot be. So
Uh,
if there's a change on that, then I would consider Christ to be a liar.
is that are you taking that belief? I was just out of
Yeah.
curiosity from back within the Christian history that there were supposedly five biblical reasons why women couldn't be
No, no,
priest.
no. I'm just basing it on the living magisterium, the popes and bishops who declare um, that it's an established truth of the faith that only men can be ordained as priests. It's in, for example, this book, Fundamentals of Catholic Dogma by Ludwig. I don't know if you've read that or similar books, but it's very well established according to the living magisterium. But I mean, they could be wrong, but the only reason they could be wrong is if Christianity is false, right?
Well, I guess they books, well, no matter what the book is, it's coming from what was presented in the past. And if you go
Yeah.
back, one of the main reasons that, like our church fathers, whether they were theologians, canon lawyers, they will say that Jesus uh, at the Last Supper was one of the reasons why women can't be priests, because there were only the 12 apostles there, and yet biblical research. There was a book by a Sister Teresa Winter, and she said that according to that, if you look at what is a Seder meal, the Passover meal was a Seder meal. And according to Jewish custom, you have families there. You have fathers, you have mother, you have children. And Jesus always traveled with his disciples, and among them were women. Another reason is supposedly Jesus chose only the 12 men to represent the 12 tribes of Israel. And John Vingegaard said, if you look back, the Israel was so patristic at that time that there was no way that Jesus could appoint women to leadership roles. And it wasn't that he didn't want to appoint women. He just knew it wasn't going to fly. He would have been uh, chased over some cliff. So I mean, seriously, if you look back, these reasons right there, they're not biblical in nature. They're cultural prejudice. And until people can really study them and see them and realize they're not biblical in nature. And this idea, I guess, as well, David, that women were not made in the image of God. I mean, right in Galatians, it mentions how in the divine image, God created them, male and female. God made them. And unfortunately, back in the patristic period, unless women had a lot of money, everything, if they were married, obviously, they really had no rights. And the men at that time couldn't see woman or couldn't get the concept of Jesus making woman in their image when they themselves had authority completely over woman. So it's something that if you can see like the whole picture.
Well, I believe men and women are equal in dignity, but they're different, and there are differences. And I just stumbled upon or looked up the actual dogma. It says the sacrament of order, that is to say, holy orders, can be validly received by a baptized person of the male sex only. And it gives early church fathers, it doesn't give biblical arguments. It gives arguments from the early church fathers, and it gives, yeah, must be followed at state race is necessary for worthy reception. So it doesn't give a lot of justification in this particular book. There are 3 paragraphs. I won't read them to you, but
Oh no,
they're usually
that's interesting.
yeah, there are usually scriptural arguments for each dogma. This particular one doesn't have. So
But that point that I guess comes out and says specifically, that only males can attain the role of priesthood. Again, that's getting back to a gender issue where this belief that women are not equal in equality, and yet through baptism, we go through the same baptism as you did as a baby boy, and yet we get to that point, obviously, and we can't answer God's call. And I guess, where did Jesus ever denigrate women and say they were unclean? Where did Jesus say they were unequal when he had women disciples with him? There's just so many points that if you have to go back to the early history, which is so new for all of us. Because like I grew up in the as I said, 50s. And this wasn't until in the 2000s that I came across this biblical research, and why people will say, in fact, one lady said it in a picket line, well, if this is the truth of what, you're contending, that there were women priests, women deacons, bishops back then, why isn't our church has told us that? And if you know the history, if they admit that, they're admitting that they have lied to any woman in the church. And as of 1976, the Pope has his own commission, and it's called the Pontifical Biblical Commission. And they looked into the very study of having women as women priests in the Catholic Church. And they emphatically came out and said that there is no biblical reason why women can't be priests. So instead of, this is my own personal feeling, instead of getting stuck with an argument of women priests going way back through the centuries, I think it would be really informative to go from that very point that the church has said there's no biblical reason to prevent women from becoming priests. And then, okay, well then why haven't you moved on this? Or from Vatican II, Gaudium et Spes, under the Constitution of the Church in the Modern World, there was an article in there, 29, and basically it was contending that the church should remove any type of discrimination, whether it's racial, whether it's sexual. Again, they came out with that. They haven't moved on that. Um, and then, going back to what was said in way back about Jesus in the divine image, women are made in Jesus's image. Or even St. Paul in Galatians saying there's no male or female, all are one in Christ Jesus. I guess there's this awful distinction, and it comes even, we were talking about Middle Ages, you have to go back to the very beginning, to the early church fathers, because I wondered personally as a woman, where did this prejudice come against women that is so blatant? I mean, really. And John Vingegaard said back at the time in Rome, of course, they had the money, they had the big armies. They were the first ones that devised like a civil law system. And what happened was over in Italy, there were Catholic theologians, and they were living under the same culture. And this civil law, they said, was so demeaning to women that these Catholic theologians basically took that law and brought it into the Catholic Church and like used that against women. So right from the beginning, sadly, there was this twisted perversion about women. And then going up in the early centuries, there were even canon lawyers. And this one canon lawyer, he was calling women she-wolves, night owls, sows, prostitutes, bitches. And Gary Macy had said that was one of the things they used to begin the celibacy thing. They put down women as being like evil, and they were always the temptresses, that it was always their fault.
Yeah,
But
I remember reading the life of our local saint here in Montreal, Quebec. I don't know if you've heard of him, Saint Brother Andre Bessette.
no,
I
no,
read I
never.
read his life, and he famously said, he was a little bit hard on women, I guess you could say. It sounded to me like he was blaming women, because of all the sin, the lust that's in the world. I don't remember the exact context of his comment, but it left me. I was a little bit disturbed because I thought it sounded sexist. But I leave it in God's hands, and I trust like this man is a saint, and he must have meant something. And he could have maybe he was just wrong. Maybe he just had a human weakness, and he had a prejudice against women. Maybe I don't know. I don't know. But I did notice that, and he made a connection to Eve, like how Eve was to blame in the Garden of Eden with the fall. But I've heard other Catholics say, well, no, Eve isn't the primary one at fault. It's Adam, because of the difference of the roles of Adam and Eve. Adam was the head, and she came from his side, and his role was to be the leader, to be the priest, basically, and to guide and protect her. So that's the traditional teaching that I've always heard. So I was a little bit surprised when I heard this local saint, basically blaming Eve and saying that it was her fault and that she led Adam astray. But I think we can find biblical references to the fall where they talk about Adam's culpability and Eve's culpability. I haven't done a thorough study of it, obviously, but it's interesting stuff.
Yes, and that's interesting that you brought up Adam and Eve, because you've probably heard of a past concept within the Catholic Church, and it was called churching. And oh my God, basically because of Adam or Eve's fall, or however way you want to say it, if a woman had a little baby girl, she would have to wait 80 days to get back into the church. And it was basically because of, Eve's sin. And then in there, they even said, in a sorrow unto you, like the child for having a baby girl. Now, if you had a baby boy, you would wait, it would only be 40 days. So again, we're getting into these variances of like the time is doubled for the lady minus the boy. But this went on into the 1940s, where seriously, if you were a woman and had a child, depending if it was a boy or a girl, you would have to go back into church and be baptized. And then I guess they were not baptized, excuse me, using holy water.
Okay.
And there would be different prayers that were said.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I have no doubt. I have no doubt whatsoever that there is sexism, misogyny, racism, all kinds of stuff in different members of the Catholic Church, even members who are part of the hierarchy. I have no doubt about that because, we are sinners. And so we shouldn't be naive and romanticize like, oh, you have a Roman collar on, you must be a saint. We can't be naive about that. We're mistaken about all kinds of things. And that includes, our friendly neighborhood priest. He's wrong about all kinds of stuff, right? So that's okay. But we just hope that he is holy enough to get to heaven and that he can set a good example, hopefully, for us and, administer prayer and the sacraments in a worthy manner. That's the main thing. But, the church is comprised of the church militant here below, and then the church suffering, and then the church triumphant in heaven. It's only up in heaven that it's pure and that it's perfect. But I wanted to ask you about the Orthodox Church and churches and the churches of the East. Why are they not having women priests either? Is it just the same mechanism of cultural misogyny, or
That I'm not
you haven't looked
well
into it?
versed in that.
You haven't looked into it?
No, I haven't looked
Because
into it.
none of the apostolic churches, as I call it, those who have apostolic succession, the Anglicans used to be part of that apostolic succession, but they no longer are, according to the Catholic Church. All of the apostolic churches, there's not one that has ever had women's ordination, and I don't think it's ever going to happen. But yeah, are there other lies? Like according to you, it's like there've been lies and cover-ups to prevent us from knowing the real truth. But are there other things, or is this the one and only lie and secret that's been covered up? Do you know what I mean?
Well, I guess as a woman, I take it more personally than you would,
Of
but
course,
I guess it was also more so an affront to find out of all places that your trust was being
of
betrayed
course, of course,
by your own church.
of course. Yeah, I understand. I sympathize with you. Given what you believe, I don't believe what you believe, but given what you believe, I would be outraged. If I were you, I'd be outraged. Okay? But I'm outraged. I mean, I'm outraged by all kinds of stuff in the church, the corruption in the church and the the
The sexual,
hypocrisy, the sexual stuff, money stuff, like it's all disgusting. It's all disgusting. All the corruption is disgusting. Now there are good and holy men and women in the church, and we have our saints and everything else. So it's not all bad. There is a beautiful, perfect baby in the bathwater, but there's a lot of bathwater. I was an anti-Catholic before I became a Catholic. I was believing all the black legends, all the lies about the church. And so when I came into the church, I knew that some of the tales that were told about the church were exaggerations, some of them were outright lies, and that some of it was true. Some of the corruption is true, and a lot of it's true. So, but we had a recent thing here in Canada where they accused the church of killing babies in the residential schools, killing children, and they made a big deal about it. And then 2 years later, they quietly admitted that it was they were mistaken, that there were no babies that were found. It was just a mistaken interpretation of some sonar that they did underground with some high-tech equipment, and they thought there were children buried there, but it turns out it was just natural features of the geography. So so there is a tendency to demonize the church. There's a lot of anti-Catholic stuff, and then there's also the reality that there's a dark side to the human beings that make up the church. So I am very sympathetic to you. I disagree with you about women's ordination, but I'm wondering, are there other issues that you have, like about the church's dogmas? Like I just read you the dogma that only men can be ordained. That's something that's a dogma you disagree with. Are there other dogmas you disagree with? Do you agree with the Trinity, the different dogmas like that?
Yes, but I want to just say a word on the sexual abuse
Yeah,
issue, and I'm not condemning every priest because
no,
there's wonderful priests.
of course.
out there. But another thing that gets me is, and of course this has gone on for centuries, if a bishop knows, a priest has raped a child, has done something horrific, I guess as a human being, I can't understand why does that bishop get to make a call to distinguish, is that act a sin or is that act a crime?
Well, it's
And
both.
if he
It's both.
sees
It's
it
both.
as
It's always both.
pardon me?
It's always both. It's always a sin. It's always a crime every time.
But I mean, if it was, I guess I'm looking at the point, if it's a crime of sending that offending priest to the police station, and
Yeah, I don't
it never
understand
goes
that.
that far.
I don't understand that. I don't understand that. I don't understand that. It seems fishy. It seems
Yeah,
fishy.
I mean, you have all these offending, priests that are out there that have been in the past.
Yeah.
And then again, we have to remember, unfortunately, if a victim is victimized, it takes years
Oh yeah.
before they can have the courage to come forward because, when they were little, they had such an awful
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
So I don't believe has fully been addressed, that it has
Yeah.
completely, stopped.
No.
But
No.
I live in Buffalo, New York, and back in 2018, everything literally hit the fan in Buffalo, New
Mm,
York.
mm,
And we had a bishop that I called an enabler,
yeah.
and he knew about an offending priest, other priests, and there was like a list. And originally, there were supposedly only maybe 23 offending priests in Buffalo. And then, of course, it came out and it went up to 52. Then it went
Wow.
up to 72. Then it went
Wow.
up to 100.
Wow.
But what it brought out was that there were a line of previous other bishops who all, again, sadly knew of, again, this is a scandal, we can't let this out. Well, what about the safety of the children?
Yeah. Justice. I don't understand that. To me, it seems satanic, but I don't want to judge. I don't want to judge anyone's heart, but and I don't know, like in terms of church administration, canon law, these sorts of things, if it's if it's being implemented poorly or if it's just on the books, it's not good. I don't know. I don't know, but it certainly doesn't give me a warm fuzzy feeling when I think about the corruption in the church, particularly when it surrounds uh, sensitive issues like abuse, sexual abuse, child abuse, these sorts of things. Like I have no answer for that. And when my anti-Catholic friends ask me how can I belong to an organization that covers up these sorts of things, my only response is, well, I'm embarrassed that that's happening. To the extent that that these evils are really happening, I'm embarrassed by that. But God
And of
is,
course, it's happening everywhere.
yeah, yeah, it happens outside of the church too, but it's more embarrassing in the church. And my only recourse when put on the spot about this embarrassing blemish on the church is to say that good is good and evil is evil, and I'm not going to call evil good. I'm never going to do that. And the other thing is that I can't sort it out. I can't sort out the hairy details: who's good, who's bad, who's going to heaven, who's going to hell. I can't sort that out, and I'm going to leave it up to each individual to try to get right with God and to make it to heaven, and God will judge these people accordingly. But I'm not going to go to hell for the sins of a pedophile priest. I'm not going to go to hell for that unless I'm actively helping him. If I'm actively helping him, yeah, okay, then I'm all culpable. But if I'm just sitting at home minding my business and someone I've never met is out there enabling or doing the actions themselves, yes, I'll pray for them and their victims. But it doesn't rock my faith, if you understand what I'm saying. Like, the church is corrupt. The members of the church are corrupt. The church itself is perfect up in heaven, but here below, it's a hot mess, as I always say.
Yes, could I maybe just share some more points
Yeah,
on Mary
of course,
Priest?
of course.
Yes, So Mary, Mother of God, was a woman priest, and her name was Mary Priest. And basically, the priest would pray to her because her official title was she was the model for all priesthood in the Catholic Church.
Okay.
And this is something that a lot of people will say, now, wait a minute, maybe you're thinking more that this was like some type of an honorary title because, of course, she was, Jesus's mother. But you have to remember that Jesus himself wasn't ordained and Mary wasn't ordained. So then, well, wait a minute, how can you say she's a priest? At the time of Mary's conception, the Holy Spirit anointed her just the same like he did when Jesus was born. So Jesus, of course, is the first high priest, and Mary is the greatest priest after him. And I just think it's wonderful to see Mary in a completely different role, that she, in a sense, was out there and she was ministering. When we hear all these stories in the Bible, there's so much that's missing because the woman's lectionary is very limited. And I really believe if that would be opened up, you would hear so many more stories. These women, they were out on the road. They were ministering just like the men were. And there's a misconception that before we didn't have any model. Boy, Mary, Mother of God, would just be a marvelous model for any young girl growing up. Like I happen to come from an Irish family, and it used to be in families, as far as the male side went, maybe Sean was a priest, maybe Ryan was a bishop, and maybe in some other family, Christopher became a cardinal. But what I'm trying to say is there was this religious heritage passed on from generation to generation. Well, then we look at the other half of the Catholic Church, the women, and where is our religious heritage? This was completely, in a sense, annihilated when the church fathers completely changed the definition of ordination. Ordination used to be a ceremony where a person would move into a particular ministry in a particular community. But when they redefined it, ordination granted power and a specific spiritual status to a particular individual. So now you had the focus of ordination was on priesthood, and the power, obviously, at the consecration of the holy elements. But in that canon law as well, women were now forbidden to ever go on the altar. So that, let's face it, that was a final blow to them to not be able to perform their priestly functions, as they previously had.
You believe in the real presence in the Eucharist, obviously?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. So there's nothing controversial about your Catholicism apart from the women's ordination stance that you take, because that is controversial. You know that. Are there any other?
Again, it's controversial today
Yeah.
because so many Catholics, women,
Yeah.
have never heard this wonderful truth.
Right. But it is controversial for those reasons. It is controversial. Are there other controversial beliefs that you have that are considered unorthodox, rightly or wrongly? They're considered unorthodox, or is that the only one?
That's the only one.
Oh, okay. I'm just reading now. Dayton, the University of Dayton, has a very interesting article on the priestly dimension of Mary, and we've got big name saints that are using the title that you mentioned of Mary as the model for priests, and I agree fully with everything I'm reading here. I put the link in the live chat. I'll send you the link.
Oh,
I'd be
thank you.
curious to hear what you had to say about it. But yeah, I have no problem with Mary as model for priest. I have absolutely no problem with that. She's the model for everything. She's the model for everything, right? And we're all priest, prophet, and king. Like you're priest, prophet, and king, right?
Definitely.
I don't know if king is the right word, but you know, you have that royal dignity
The
because
pre-smell Melchizedek, yes.
yeah, you have that, and so it's definitely interesting. You know, I have a devotion, obviously, many devotions to the Blessed Virgin Mary, and there's so many titles, you know, in the daily prayers that I do to her and honoring her. And yeah, I mean, it's amazing. Actually, Saint Bernard of Clairvaux is one of the saints who's talking about the priestly role of Mary. So that's pretty
Oh,
interesting.
okay.
And so he's pretty late, right? I mean, which century is he? He's pretty late. Saint Bernard of Clairvaux. When do you think he lived? 12th century.
Was
10,
he in the middle,
11th and 12th. 11th and 12th.
yeah, Middle Ages?
11th and 12th. Okay, so I thought he was later. So yeah, he's speaking of that priestly role of Mary too. So it's
Okay.
very interesting stuff. So you've dug pretty deeply into all the sources on
Yeah, and even Saint Albert the Great, he was talking on Mary that she was a bishop. You know, she
ah
was an apostle. She was this. She was that.
yeah. Yeah, I have no problem with that. I love that. I love
And I can't. I don't have the name of the painting, but they referenced a 15th century painting with Mary dressed in priestly attire,
ah
and she was giving communion to a pope, and the pope had
ah
they call it a tiara,
yeah.
and then he had taken that off and set it on the side, and in this painting there's a little like cherub, like an angel, whatever, to the side, like with a frown looking at the at the pope. So they were just but it was giving the illustration that, you know, Mary was a priest.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, there certainly is, you know, there certainly is a mystical priesthood that I think women have access to and you know, a duty to fulfill. So, but it's different. I think I would say that the church teaches definitively that it's different from the sacramental priesthood, right? That's what they officially teach. That's what they officially teach today. And you're saying it's
Well, this same former priest, John Vingegaard, and I can't remember the exact wording, but he specifically mentioned both John Paul
okay.
the second
Yeah.
and Pope Benedict the 16th, and whatever it was that they, you know, said in regards to like what you were saying, he said there could another pope could come in and basically make changes,
Oh, really? Okay.
and this wouldn't be
It's just a discipline. It's not a. But I just read it in my book of dogmas that it's a dogma.
yeah, no, I believe that it's in these books, but
uh,
um,
yeah. The
it's
book.
not, you know.
This is a fallible book. It's a fallible book. It's not infallible.
Okay.
So I mean, it could be wrong. It could be wrong, right? But you know, I haven't looked too deeply into this. Maybe I will. But I'm going to my main interest is what does the church teach officially and infallibly? Like I mean, you know, you believe in the charism of
But I guess
infallibility that the
I
church has, right?
believe, just like previously any other Catholic, that there weren't women priests,
Yeah,
because I believed what the hierarchy had told me.
yeah.
But then, you know, there were people question me all the time. Well, gee, this isn't in the Bible, and I said, you're right. I said this is in biblical research. Well, unfortunately, to so many, if it's not in the Bible, then it's like it doesn't have like a real credence to it. Um,
Yeah, well, you know, this book told me that there are two sources. It's you know, we have the sacred tradition and we have the sacred scriptures, and every infallible dogma comes from that sacred deposit of faith. And if all the teachings of Jesus were written down, the world can contain the books, as St. John says at the end of his uh, gospel. So obviously, tradition is another aspect of the sacred deposit of faith that we have to derive
But
infallible
it's
dogmas
that,
from.
oh yeah, the tradition that you just said,
Yeah.
um, when you compare findings, biblical research findings, that's where we find out that these 5 reasons why women shouldn't be priests are not biblical at all. It's cultural prejudice. And that's the stuff that isn't brought out. And that's what really changed my mind.
Yeah. Um, Sent Certa. Right now, what I'm doing is I'm just looking up the dog because they're different. There's a hierarchy of dogmatic certainty, and this is not a de fide dogma. It's not the highest level. It's Sent Certa. So I'm just gonna, while you speak to me and my audience, I'm just gonna look up what is the level of certitude that we have with that particular dogma because it's Sent Certa. But you can
I guess I just don't feel there's any harm if if you understand the things that were taught to be biblical, that this was a tradition in every fact now, were not tradition. They can't be reasons why women can't be priest. But the 1976 finding, of course, that I previously mentioned,
yeah.
I really believe that says it all. If there's no biblical reason to prevent women from becoming priest, then why don't we bring back what was, in fact, actuality in the early centuries of our Christian church, Catholic Church?
Yeah, well, I mean, there are extra biblical sources, like I said, the tradition, there's sacred tradition, which is, the infallible teachings of the God-man Jesus Christ, which we can draw on, the church can draw on using that charism of infallibility. So, yeah, what is the name of your book, by the way, that you
It's called Scandal in the Shadows, meaning omission. Scandal in the Shadows, the original priest, Mother Mary.
Okay. I found the level of certainty, the grades of certainty. We have the first grade, which is de fide. Then there's a second grade, which is fides ecclesiastica, which is like Catholic truths. And then we have teachings proximate to the faith. And then the fourth level is the level for that only men can be ordained. And it says a teaching pertaining to the faith, theologically certain. It is a doctrine on which the teaching authority of the church has not yet fully pronounced, not yet finally pronounced, but whose truth is guaranteed by its intrinsic connection with the doctrine of revelation. So this is what this book is saying, is that it's a theological conclusion that cannot be doubted because it's guaranteed by its intrinsic connection to the doctrines of revelation. Because, this is in the hierarchy of the certainty of the dogmas. If I tell you that 1 + 1 = 2, you can derive that 2 + 2 = 4 from that, even though it's not explicitly in your sacred books, because we do have reason and we're able to think, and like I keep telling you, the church has the charism of infallibility, so it's able to draw theological conclusions and to give us grades of certainty which are not the highest grade, but which are connected to those highest grade ones in such a way that we cannot doubt them. So that's what this book is saying. Again, it might be wrong, but I'm not, I'd rather trust this book and the other theological books that have said the same thing, and the popes that I've heard say that women cannot be priests, than just because you have less authority than I do. Do you understand my predicament?
Yes, if you're going by what they believed is true back then when that was written. And I don't know, have you been following about the synod that's going
No,
to be happening next year?
the synod on synodality, are you talking about?
Well, no, the whole thing that's they're going to be right this month. They're over in Rome,
Yeah,
and
it's
they're openly discussing things, issues that they had like hearings or where people could go, meetings.
the synod, right?
Yeah. And if you were there, you could say, well, gee, maybe my concern is woman priest, or my concern is this and that, because the Pope wanted to really hear from the average everyday Catholic what their concerns were. And they've been working and working on this, and there's been different groups like all across Europe and the United States. And they're starting to really, sort of hone in on that. But I just see it as a miracle that in this synod that they're at the point actually of even discussing this issue of woman priest.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure they want to keep it at women deacons. But I mean, even that's to me, that's the Holy Spirit. And the whole thing behind this is Pope Francis is trying to get the people, not only the cardinals, the bishops, the clergy. What's different in this one is he's invited lay people.
Yeah.
And they as well, so many, are going to have the chance to actually vote. But again, he's invoking the Holy Spirit and the sense of people getting together and actually, really making a difference. And I guess maybe I'm a realist. I, grew up in the 1950s, and when Vatican II came, I just thought it was so refreshing because they went back again. They used biblical research. And the Mass that you and I go to today, not the Latin Mass came in the 16th century, but the Mass that we actually have today in the Catholic Church is the closest to how the first Christians celebrated their Mass. And the priest turned around. In the 50s, you saw the priest back. Now, of course, the priest is facing the people. When you receive communion, you yourself can put the communion in your mouth, not like previously where the priest was giving you the communion. And there's these changes, but they were all to make the laity be a part, of the Mass. And there used to be like an altar rail that went around the whole
Altar.
sacristy,
Yeah.
the altar, area there. And that was like a separation. And that was removed to make it open. But if you really get into the study of why these changes were made initially, it wasn't to break up people's faith. And if we really look into the past history, before Latin, what was said was Greek. So initially in the church, you had Greek, you had Latin, and now it's English. But for some reason, there's some people that are afraid of, like, to me, they seem to be afraid of Vatican II. And
Yeah.
Pope John the 23rd said it's time to open up the windows of the church
Yeah,
and to read.
Pope Saint John the 23rd. He's a
Yes.
saint. He's one of my favorite saints. I love Vatican II, and I've seen abuses in the Novus Ordo because of the spirit of Vatican II, like the satanic spirit of rebellion that's everywhere in the world. And so you see abuses, and we've already talked about certain kinds of abuses. There are other kinds of abuses too. There's also this new thing with today that's a hot topic, which is the LGBTQIA whatever, what I call sexual perversion and masturbation of all kinds. I think it's demonic, but the church is very gentle when it comes to loving the sinner, hating the sin, but loving the sinner. And Pope Francis is very gentle with those who are suffering from same-sex attraction. I want to get your feedback, because you seem like a very progressive and liberal woman,
Yes,
on the LGBTQ stuff. What's happening?
I don't see that as demonic at all.
No?
And I look at Jesus' ministry as being very inclusive.
Okay. You think it's okay for men to sodomize each other?
They have done studies, scientific studies, and they do say that people that are gay, there is a difference in their brain, but these are living human beings.
Yeah.
And as Pope Francis said, who am I? Who are you
To
to
judge.
say, to judge
If
them?
they are seeking Jesus Christ, who am I to judge? I say the same thing. I agree with Pope Francis. But what I'm asking you, because Pope Francis has said that it's sin, do you agree with him that it's sin, homosexual acts?
I don't look at it that way. If people are
No?
in love, if people
Love
are
is
in
love?
love, if they're in love, if they're not hurting anyone,
Do
let
you
them do what they want to do.
Okay, yeah, because that's at odds with what the church has always taught. We're supposed to reserve that sort of the marriage act, that sexual intimacy between a man and a woman who are in a
But
lifelong committed
remember, these
relationship.
laws, all of these are canon laws that are man-made.
Well, no, there's the
Any of
natural law.
the
There's the
canon
natural
laws,
law. The natural law is
but I
is a
mean, but
thing.
canon law was not even in existence when Jesus was alive.
Yeah, yeah. It's not about canon law for me. It's not about canon law. It's about the natural law. It's about what is human nature, what are we made for, and what is sexual intimacy? What is it? What is it? Is it just pleasure? Because I mean, yeah, pleasure is good. Pleasure is good. But so it's interesting. So when I asked you earlier, are there any other areas of church teaching that you disagree with, or beliefs you hold, other unorthodox beliefs you hold? Well, this open-mindedness towards same-sex acts, it seems like that's a very controversial opinion that you hold.
Again, I think I guess I look at the ministry of Jesus and then
Yeah,
compare that to the ministry in the church. And Jesus was there to heal. He showed love. He
yeah,
showed compassion,
I
and
love
he
that.
showed inclusion.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's not right. Again, I see it as a form, I guess, David, of judging of
Well,
judging individuals.
yeah, we can't judge the heart, but we can judge objective, grave matter. And when like I think adultery is a sin, and Jesus didn't smile on that sin. He just told the woman caught in adultery to go and sin no more. So, it's a very soft, gentle touch that he had. And but adultery is wrong. It's wrong. It's wrong. Adultery is wrong. It's wrong. It's always going to be wrong. I know that not because of canon law. I know that because of natural law. And
Well, I guess we can agree to
do you think
disagree.
adultery is okay?
No,
Oh, okay. You agree with me on adultery, but just not on the gay stuff. What about abortion? Do you think it's okay?
not if people are running out just to have sex and constantly have children.
So in certain circumstances, whatever, it's okay, or what's your take?
Uh, Again,
Rape
I
victim,
mean, for
rape
myself,
victims, or
I don't believe if someone is raped, they obviously should have a woman should have a choice if she wants to carry that child the full term or not. Or if there's other circumstances, again, it should come down to that woman. Because again, who am I to judge anyone? It's none of my business.
yeah, we can't judge the heart, but we can judge the objective matter at hand. And killing an innocent child is always wrong. It's always wrong. It's always wrong. Even if you were raped, it's wrong to why punishing the child? Why punishing the child? Like, doesn't make sense. Why killing the child?
Well,
It
if
doesn't make
you're,
sense. It's wrong.
you've never had the experience of carrying a child,
I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying it's wrong to
you
kill
have
the
to,
innocent child. It's just wrong. It's wrong to kill the innocent child. I'm not being judgmental
well,
of the person. I'm being objectively judgmental of the objective grave matter at hand. But I respect you. You have your own opinions on that and other things. I love and respect you. I'm not going to judge your heart. But when we're talking about about objective facts, like I'm with the church on all of them. Like, sexual morality is a big deal for me, and all morality. You know, it's because we can't stand before God if we're impure. We have to be pure and holy. It's not easy. It's not easy, right? So that's a struggle. But yeah, I don't consider myself a conservative Catholic. You know, I'm just trying to be a good Catholic, but I respect other people's opinions. If you're a little bit left of center or whatever, as you seem to be, that's fine. That's fine.
Yes, I'm at the right place.
Maybe you see yourself like you're at the center and the church has moved to the right, right? That's probably how you see it. Is that fair?
The church, unfortunately, has gotten from the past several of the previous popes, unfortunately, we've gone backwards instead of forwards. And it's very interesting. I was picketing this cathedral in Buffalo. It was built around the Civil War, and they basically wanted to remove the crucifixes and some other stuff. And I mean, this goes with the cathedral, with its time period.
Yeah.
And so there was a group of us from then it was called Preservation Coalition Buffalo. We were out picketing, and there was some dinner, and a cardinal was coming, and we were in front of the Statler, with our signs, not shouting, but our signs talk for us. And all of a sudden, this big black limousine pulls up, and who gets out? He was a cardinal then, was Pope Paul II. He was a cardinal then. And
Oh.
I will say, I remember he stood there, and he must have stood there maybe 2 or 3 minutes and was taking in what our individual signs said. And then, of course, he went to go in, and of course, we all, separated. But you never know who you're going to see on a picket line.
Wow, that was Pope Paul the Sixth?
Pope Paul II.
Oh, John Paul II.
Yes.
John Paul II. Oh, okay. Ah, very interesting. So you got to meet the man while he was cardinal.
Well, I was this, so close to
Close.
him.
Wow, did you feel like he was a good man or no?
Yes, but then I didn't obviously believe his views on women. You'll remember there was
Yeah.
a Catholic Sister of Mercy, Sister Teresa Kane, and she was in the Washington Cathedral, and she basically asked him in so many words that that he considered women. And I remember he did not look pleased at all.
Yeah, it's funny because he is seen as somewhat of a conservative pope, but Pope Francis is seen by the right. I'm not on the right, but the Catholics who are on the right, they see him as very, very progressive, liberal, and that he wants to change doctrine and he wants to make big changes, and that's how he's seen. But you don't see him that way. You don't see Pope Francis as a progressive, do you?
I see him progressive in the sense that he definitely has opened up, like with the Synod, a discussion of on whether it's women's ordination or getting out to the very members of the laity. Finally, within our church, there's just such a separation between the hierarchy and the laity, and yet Vatican II was all about the people of God.
Yeah.
And through the years, that separation has just unfortunately widened. But he really wants to hear what are the Catholic, the everyday, like myself, everyday Catholics, what our concerns are.
Yeah. So you like him compared to the other recent popes. You like Pope Francis.
Oh, I think he's like, as Pope John the 23rd had said, to open the windows and see the signs of the times.
So he's like an ally. You see him as an more of an ally than some of the previous
I
popes.
just see him seeing the reality of what the situation is today in the Catholic Church.
Yeah. What was I going to ask you now about? Oh, I had a good question for you. Oh, come on now. What was the question? This is a very good question for you about Pope Francis. Oh, I can't remember. But
Saved by the Bill.
Oh, it's a good question. Hopefully it'll come back to me. We'll talk about other things and hopefully it'll come back to me. We do have to wrap it up here soon. But what are some other points that you want to make sure you get in our discussion today? Anything else? Any other highlights or bullet points that you haven't touched on quite yet?
Oh, I just want the woman out there to know that this is the time to make your voice heard, that it's just wonderful. We as women now realize that Mary, Mother of God, was a woman priest. And if she was a woman priest, then why aren't we woman priests?
I just remembered my question. Do you mind if I interrupt you?
No.
Can I interrupt you? It's about one of my guests. I interviewed a controversial priest, Father James Martin. What do you think about him?
Oh, now see, that's funny. I don't see him as controversial because he speaks from the heart,
Yeah.
and we need more people that are in sync with the laity of our church and going back to Jesus, being present in such a real, genuine way to the people of God.
So, do you have any suspicions about his sexual orientation, if he's attracted to men or no?
I have no idea.
You have no clue. You've never met a man and thought maybe this guy likes men? You've never had that feeling?
No,
You've never met a man that was effeminate and you thought this man likes other men? That's never happened to you?
no, that hasn't
In
happened
life.
to me.
In life, you can't recognize a gay man when you're in real life, right?
Oh, yes, I can.
Yeah,
But
okay, but it's called gaydar. When your gaydar goes off, it's like, I think this man's gay. But with Father James Martin, you don't sense that at all.
no,
Okay, you think he's a heterosexual man. Okay. Because I don't know, but people on the internet are speculating that he suffers from same-sex attraction. Maybe he's, unrepentant homosexual. I don't know. I spoke with the man.
I have no idea, and it's none of my business.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's an interesting thing because he's crusading for the LGBTQ community.
Yes, wonderful people.
Hopefully he's doing it in a Catholic way, in a good way, and I give him the benefit of the doubt that he is. And in my discussion with him, I liked him, and we had a great conversation, and we just talked about Christ and his church and about his order, the Jesuit order, and we talked about Christian stuff, But
did you openly ask him? I mean, you
he
seem
told
to be
me
curious.
he told me before going live. He told me, I said, are there any topics off the table? And he said, yes. You cannot ask me if I'm gay. And I said, why not? I said, that was like my number one question. I wanted to ask you that. He said, well, you can ask me, but I'm not going to tell you. And I think he has direct orders from his superior in the Jesuit order not to reveal that, which is a bit strange. And the other question that I'm not allowed to ask him is he Orthodox? Does he believe what the church teaches? He told me I can't ask him that. Well, he said I can ask, but he can't answer. So that was also strange. That was also very strange. Don't ask me if I'm Orthodox. Don't ask me if I'm gay. It's like, I find that a little bit strange. But like I said, I give him the benefit of the doubt, and I like him, and I'm cheering for him. I think I hope he's doing good work. You seem to think that he's doing good work, but if you listen to his enemies on the internet, who are obviously very hateful, they say that he's up to no good, right? But I don't trust the hateful Catholics, like the anti-Catholic Catholics. I don't trust them. So I'm skeptical of their claims because they say Pope Francis is this, Pope Francis is that, and Father James Martin is this, and Father James Martin is that. And they'll probably say all kinds of things about you if they listen to this episode. They'll say, Margaret Mary is this,
Yes,
and
I've
she's
been
that.
called a heretic.
So that's just the way the rad trads are, the radical traditionalists. So very nice to meet you. Where can people buy your book? I put a link in the description to your website. Can people buy your book there?
Oh, yeah, they can go to Amazon and it's there.
Oh, okay.
And if they want to do further research, please go to yourradicaltruth.com. That's yourradicaltruth.com and be amazed.
That's the one I linked. So I linked that for you, okay?
Okay.
So how are you enjoying Podmatch? Because we met on Podmatch and it's working out very well for me. I'm meeting lots of interesting guests like you. You're the only one pushing women's ordination, but there are lots of interesting guests for other reasons. What do you think of Podmatch? Has it helped you to meet podcasters, or do you have your own podcast, or what's the story there?
I do have my own podcast, Your Radical Truth, and it is on Apple and
Ah,
a different,
providers.
platforms.
Yeah,
And
nice.
it's really exciting because I have been able to interview women priests. These were Catholic. Okay, there's an organization called Catholic Women Priests Today. And what happened was Roman Catholic Women Priests, USA. And over in Europe, there was a bona fide bishop that actually ordained women, Catholic women, that wanted to be priests. And they came back a year later if they wanted to be a bishop.
Ah,
But you know the apostolic succession.
yeah.
If a person is ordained, obviously from the bishop, there's that succession that goes all the way back to Peter.
Uh-huh.
So now you have about 261 women in the United States, and then there's this group, it's over in Europe as well. So there's women priests now, there's women bishops, but isn't it sad that these were Catholic women that had to take this route in order to answer God's call to them? And I really think if you ask this question, maybe, how would God feel that He's sending a call out to Catholic women who have been baptized, and yet they can't answer this call? They're forced to go to another denomination, or they're forced to go this route. And this, again, I'm sorry, David, it isn't right. Not in
Yeah,
the year 2023.
we can both agree, you and I can agree that if, and it's a big if God is calling women to the Catholic priesthood, if God is calling women to the Catholic priesthood,
Definitely. Yes.
if that's the case, then we should have women priests. I agree with you 100%. I just don't believe that God is calling women to the Catholic priesthood. I don't believe that. I don't have any reason to believe that because I haven't read the books you've read. Okay. And the living hierarchy of the church, the infallible church, tells me that women cannot be priests. They don't have that calling. Maybe it's a calling, but it's not from God. So where's the calling coming from? The other
But
place.
I think that's why it's so necessary. Get involved, find out what's going on in this synod,
Yeah.
because finally the voices of the average everyday Catholic, their concerns, whether it's women that want to be priests, they're finally coming to fruition. And it's overdue.
We'll see what happens. So I'm gonna with all my guests, I enroll all my guests in a perpetual mass. You're going to be getting a lot of graces coming your way, extra graces on top of the ones you're already receiving. And so I hope you'll
Thank you.
pray for me and mine also.
Okay.
And next time when you come back, if you come back again, I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into your sort of day-to-day faith, like in terms of prayer life, sacraments, where do you get your sacraments, your devotions to Mary and the other saints. And there's a lot more to dig into also with the Bible, like talking just generally about your faith and the Bible. It seems like you know a lot. So I hope you come back and we'll just chat. We'll chat some more. Maybe not so much about women's ordination as other aspects of your faith, unless I read a bunch of your books and I start to have other questions about that, and then I'll have you back again for that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, David.
Very nice to meet you, Margaret. You're a lovely lady. And someone in my live chat said this lady is great. Thanks for having her on. So you're getting some love there. And
Thank you for sharing that.
yeah, so you're a very nice lady. So take good care. God bless, and we'll talk soon, okay?
You too. Take it easy.
Thank you, Margaret.
Goodbye, David.
Bye-bye.